Everyone, welcome to the first ever BBP podcast. We are so excited to present this episode to you. This is number one, hopefully of many, number one. And who better to kick it off with us for episode number one is Mr. Dean Stinchfield.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, very much so. My name is Blake Welling. I'm joined along with my co-host here, Takashi.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Super excited to be here.
Yeah. So Dean, for those that don't know you, that's watching this either on YouTube or that are listening, just kind of introduce yourself a little bit for people that don't know you. Throw your 2 cents in.
Okay. My name is Dean Stinchfield. From a career standpoint, started at University of Wisconsin-Madison, got a computer science, management and information systems, and a business administration degree. I went to school, believe it or not. I wanted to sell computers and get into the technology world. Sure. In the 80s, that was probably new and exciting. Now it's a little more ubiquitous now. But I came out of college and I started selling for IBM at the time, selling technology solutions to businesses, helping them implement technology to help manage and control, their businesses. I was selling hardware for probably about 4 to 5 years. Then I went in before the year 2000, started selling software. Mm-hmm. And as I was selling software, I started working with an organization that provided financing for some of these large projects. And as a young guy, about 29, I started a career in financing where I would finance technology projects. Sweet. And that was a fascinating career because I was kind of at the confluence between finance and technology. And really, any time where there was innovation that was disrupting the business models at the time, I would pull together financing for that, whether that might be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, or it could be with Verizon, or I did a lot of work in hospitals within the radiology environment. Anytime there was a disruption of the business model, I would pull together a financial model that would allow them to invest and bring the best technology in at the right time, and then give them a model that allows them to change and innovate as they manage the life cycle of that technology, which was a great career because it gave me an opportunity to constantly be working on the cutting edge or the innovative edge of our technology, dealing with business executives out across the U.S. It was not international, it was mostly U.S. based. And it was a really awesome career. So from a business standpoint, I started out in the sales part of that business, and then moved. I was the VP of sales and part of the executive team for an organization that was really at the cutting edge of the fusion between finance and technology, FinTech. Yep. We were an innovator in that environment.
Awesome.
I worked there for 29 years. Wow. So I saw the changing aspects of the culture, business culture, and then tried to navigate that, as a faith-filled person as you're walking through that changing culture.
Sure. So I'm going to ask a question. So for those of you that aren't really familiar with sales, what was kind of that environment like being in the sales background? I know you're a VP of sales. If you just kind of want to describe that a little bit, what was that like for you?
Great question, Blake. What I enjoyed about it is as a salesperson in that kind of environment, what I really needed to do was engage the minds of the executives that I was working with and understand what are their aspirations, what are they trying to accomplish both from their administration of finance goals, but their technology goals. And then I was really competing in the theater of the mind when you're looking at financing. Mm-hmm. So I think people buy for 4 reasons. Okay. You're going to buy for one of the reasons a company might buy is they are going to buy because you're going to give them an economic advantage. You're either going to make them more money or save them money. Yep. Or you're going to help their organization have a competitive advantage. Or you're going to reduce the risk profile of that organization. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to make their life easier. So those are kind of the 4 reasons why people buy. And most people competed on the economic side. I'm going to save you money, or I'm going to make you money.
That's probably where most people find value. It's like, hey, if I can pinch a couple pennies here, then you're our guy.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they want to compete in that world, but the way you get an account is the way you're going to lose an account. So that if you compete purely on economics, someone's going to come in and offer a cheaper product or drop their price to dislodge you.
Yep.
So I refuse to compete on that playing field. Because if I can give someone a competitive advantage, I can reduce their risk or make their life easier.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's going to have to outcompete me in those environments. It's going to be very difficult for them to do that. But if I'm just competing on the economic side, margins are lower.
Yep.
And it's easier to dislodge me just by offering a cheaper bargain.
Mm-hmm.
And people will do that all the time.
Yeah. How can you master all four of those areas? Because I know some people are, you hear the term jack of all trades, master of none, right? Like you're not specifically good at one thing.
Mm-hmm.
How can someone be good at all four? Is that not really a team?
You really can't. I love to fish. My dad taught me how to fish.
Okay.
And I took my dad and two brothers up fishing in the Arctic Circle. We're above the tree line. And we were up there for a week. The first 1 or 2 days, we're out there trying to figure out what's happening. What parts of the lake fish might be. What are some of the lures that might be effective at that time? Well, I saw business very similar. So when I would go into a business environment, I would ask a ton of questions. So in that fishing analogy, the first 2 days we didn't catch a lot, but once we kind of figured out the lake and figured out what fish we're reacting to, we're killing it. We caught over 100 pike one day. Mm-hmm. The largest one was close to 5 feet long.
Wow.
It was ridiculous.
Wow.
But the first 2 days we caught nothing. But you just tried to figure it out. So I was a relational-based salesperson. Oftentimes when I worked with an account, I had one account for 25 years. I had accounts that I would have for 10 and 15 years. Yeah. So early on when I was working with some of these accounts, I was asking questions and trying to find which one of those three are they most concerned with.
Okay. That's good.
So when I was dealing with a business executive at a hospital, maybe he was dealing with a lot of lawsuits, he or she. And so risk was the biggest thing on that the executive's mind.
That makes sense.
So I was going to channel all of my messaging through, we're going to reduce the risk profile of the organization by implementing this solution. So he's at that point, he or she is less concerned with the economic side of it. It's got to be solid or no one would do it.
Right.
But that's got to be a good bargain. But at the same time, I'm going to compete on this level. So my job was to just ask enough questions and then frame and project what's most important when you're making a decision on this business proposition. Keep this in mind. And everything would be how am I going to reduce the risk profile? Everybody else is competing over here in economics.
Yeah.
And I might get pushed in that and say, hey, but we're dealing with Johnson & Johnson and Verizon and New York Stock Exchange. It's going to be good economic value for you.
Right.
But this is why you want to buy. And then as that relationship evolves and change, I'm just constantly asking questions. Maybe in this cycle, it's going to be, I'm just overwhelmed. I need someone to make my life easier. Like if you're selling to me, my days are jacked. I'm so busy. Even though I've retired and left the business world.
Yeah.
I'm so busy. Can someone come in and make my life easier? And I just know I trust the person and they handle it. If you're listening to this and you want to sell to me, that's how you sell to me. Make my life easier.
Big tip right there. If you want to sell to Dean, make his life easy.
At that point, and that person's got it. Awesome. Whatever they're doing for me, I know that they got it handled. I don't have to put mind share on it. Well, I dealt with executives the same way. And then my job so that's when I was selling, when I was developing young salespeople, my job was to grow big souls. And I'll help them to think outside of the box and have curious minds so they can learn about lots of different aspects of the world, because that allows you to build relationships with lots of different people. Mm-hmm. And the relationship is the vehicle that you bring your business proposition through. So what I mean by that is there was an executive at one of the largest public hospitals in the U.S. down in the Southeast. And if you looked at this person, every avenue of our value systems was a complete mismatch. But he had a very curious mind. And at that time, he was super interested in Islam. And I've done some teaching on Islam. I've taught it, I went and taught pastors in Africa how to have interfaith dialogue within Islam. And this guy was fascinated, wanted to learn more about Islam. I wanted to learn more about cultures across the world. And he was intrigued that a finance guy could bring him that type of information. We bonded on that. And then everything else was, how am I going to reduce your risk profile and make your life easier? That guy was one of the best customers I ever had. I loved the guy. And we got together often just as men outside of the business world. That created a deeper relationship that I drove the business propositions through that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Speaking of relationship building, you're probably one of the best in the world, right?
I don't know that, but yeah.
What would you say are some of the things that, you do on I don't know, monthly or quarterly basis with the client to essentially keep up with the relationship?
Yeah. People get, I think, too locked into just the relationship is focused through the business proposition, and relationships are built through shared experiences. So my best clients, I would try to create shared experiences outside of the business alignment, whatever that might be. Also is asking a lot of questions. A lot of people think the salesperson is just talks all the time. And based on this conversation, you say, oh, he just talks all the time.
You're right.
But, right. But the best salespeople ask more questions than they're telling. Because if I ask enough questions and find out how they think, they're going to tell me how they want to be sold to.
Man,
so,
that's true.
I studied questioning techniques. As a salespeople, there's some really good books on how you ask good questions.
What are some of the books?
There's a book called Tactics by Greg Kokel. And this is a faith-based book, but on how to share your faith. But it's an excellent example of how you ask multiple questions to really steer the conversation without telling. So you will ask open-ended questions and you chain questions. Based on how a person answers one of your open-ended questions, then you'll ask another question to go deeper into whatever avenue that might be. And I wanted to connect with people more on what's interesting to them. Not just, again, what purely a business conversation, but I want to connect to a human being. So if I find out they might be interested in travel, okay, then we'll talk about some travel environments. Or they might be philosophically minded. So let's talk about, one of my favorite books is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Well, let's talk about Aristotle. Or again, if you're philosophically minded, I'll drive it into a philosophical channel. Because if I can come and have conversation with my clients and have shared experiences that aren't tied to the business operation, you have an opportunity to be a person of substance to that executive. For example, I raised two daughters. Okay. I love my two daughters, Sammy and Katie. And I traveled a lot for business. Well, I would take my daughters when they were younger. I wanted them to see, what does it look like? When dad goes on the road, what happens? And I wanted them to see, what does a business meeting look like? So I'd take my daughters and I would find a female executive and say, hey, I'd like to travel with one of my daughters and I want them to have a business role model. Would you be willing to have a meeting if I brought my daughter out on travel?
That's so good.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So I'm meeting with a female executive. I'm putting them, I'm asking them, I'm honoring them by saying, I'd like my daughter to model and see you in the business environment. So that was good for my daughter. That was good for them. But it's a relationship that's outside of the business proposition. Now they see me as a girl dad. Completely different environment. I'm connecting at that level. Good luck beating me in that account.
Yes.
Another great question is a book on that is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That's a good
I know it's a super old book, but Dale Carnegie talks about, how do you connect with people?
Yeah.
And you give them, you ask them for their help. That's respectful and honoring to them. So, I'm just trying to give you examples of how I might build relationships through shared experiences. I would do things like that.
Gotcha. So, when you build these relationships, how do you as Christian, man or woman, we're called to, really use these relationships and really develop them and hopefully introduce Christ into some of these non-believers? What did you,
That's a delicate balance in our culture right now. So one of the key things, to try to be a businessman, a man of faith in business, too often people segment their life. Okay, this is my sacred, this is my religious duty, and this is my business duty.
Yep.
And it's like they have two very different segments of their life because culture tries to say, well, you can't bring forth your faith into the business realm.
Yeah.
But you know what? Jesus looks down at the planet and every square inch and every minute and just says mine.
Yep.
So we have to live an integrated life. If we try to have two different lives, we pull apart at the seams. So you have to be the same person, whether it's in church or whether it's in business. So, but at the same time, I never wanted to use Jesus as a sales tool.
Yeah,
he wasn't a
feature.
feature. He wasn't a feature in my business proposal. Like, choose me because I'm the Jesus guy. Now, if as I'm having these relationships, ask me what I was doing on the weekend, I might talk about, well, you know what? I had a meeting with the men of the kingdom. Oh yeah, tell me more about that. And if it came up naturally, because that's who I am and that's the foundation of the rest of my life, if it comes out naturally, I'd let it come out. Because that's just who I am. And that allows me to be a faithful witness because the culture says, oh, this is what a Christian person is right now. And I think there's a lot of pejoratives that are tied to Christianity, but that's a false narrative.
Right.
So what we need to be is men and women of faith that authentically live out our faith while we're in business. So you might hear me say there's no sacred secular divide. There's no difference between a Christian man on Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock and Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. You should be the exact same person. Jesus says, you will be my witness in the as you are goings of your life.
Yep.
The as you are goings is wherever you go. The Old Testament talks about, when you wake up in the morning, when you're walking alongside the road, you're bringing forth God's truth. We're ambassadors. Every step we take is a kingdom step, and it's a kingdom property wherever you may be. And your job is to bring that environment more in line with the gospel of the kingdom, which is Paul describes as righteousness, peace, and joy.
Yep.
So you have to be an integrated person when you're in front of your business team at work, or whether you're selling and your customers and the partners that you're selling to. And we shouldn't be afraid of that.
Yeah.
I always wondered when I was meeting with some of these executives, when I left, they'd be like, that's an interesting person who brings different perspectives and new ideas and has character. I would want that person on my personal board of directors.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you can be that person of substance and be authentic, that's different than everybody else in the marketplace. I believe that Christians right now should be the best salespeople. They should be the best business executives, best teachers, best paramedics, the best cashiers at Target. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Because you step forth and you represent Jesus.
Amen.
Okay? You should live an integrated life. That sets you apart. It's easy right now.
Yep.
I know people say, oh, it's so hard to live an authentic Christian life. I think it's easy because you stand out.
Okay.
You believe that morality is vertical, not horizontal. And what I mean by that is all morality is stacked up and everything has an equal claim. No, morality is vertical. There's different levels of morality, and it's defined by God, not my feelings or my circumstance. And that is the same person across multiple circumstances, across multiple days. That person stands out.
Oh, awesome.
Well, thanks for sharing. I think right now we're just gonna wrap it up here with just a couple of questions, closing questions. So Blake, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so we're going to start with 4 questions, then we'll kind of wrap up the close. We're going to do this for every speaker that we have, just some questions that the viewers can listen to and kind of recognize. So first one, I know that we're a very Christian-focused organization, BBP is. So besides the Bible, and I know you mentioned this earlier, you're talking about a couple of different books, but what is a good book? It could be business or Christian related that you have read that you would recommend, or that's like one of your favorites?
That's a tough question. I love to read. It's an exercise for my mind.
Yeah.
Probably the number one book recommendation would be Martin Lloyd-Jones' Studies on the Sermon of the Mount. It's an old book. I love dead authors because their canon's closed. They aren't going to do something that embarrasses me anymore. Yeah. So I love being able to recommend someone. So he was a preacher in London in the 50s, and he did his sermon series over a year and a half. It's a long study, but it's just describing Jesus's kickoff sermon, which is the Sermon on the Mount. The rest of his sermons and the rest of what you see in the Gospels is all of his parables are just examples that are tied to the Sermon on the Mount. And that's the best book I've found on Jesus' most important sermon.
Wow.
And it's something that you can apply to your marriage. You can apply to your friendship, your relationship with your parents, in the marketplace. It's fantastic.
Awesome. So second question, I know you kind of described this a little bit from what I found. So I don't know about you, Takashi, but so what is your edge, or how did you stay competitive in your marketplace from when you were active?
That's a great question. By the way, I'm still active. I'm not retired. I'm repurposed.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
So there's no such thing as retirement in the Christian life. You're just repurposed into a different environment.
Yeah.
So, I think if I have a competitive edge, is I have a curious mind and I want to stay outside my comfort zone. God's made us, we have physical bodies, we have mind, we have relationships, we have our soul.
Yep.
And what I've seen as people get old, or as they get maybe a little more stale, is they retreat into a comfort zone. We see that in our physical environments. If you're stressing yourself, both aerobically and through strength training and flexibility, you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. It's good for your body.
Yep.
Well, the same thing's true of your mind, your relationships, and your soul. So I want to try to stay outside my comfort zone, learning new things about different cultures. Relationally, am I building new relationships? And from my soul, am I pressing into God's eternal truths? So when my finite mind encounters infinite concepts, it's definitely outside my comfort zone. And that pushes me. And that's when you're alive. I mean, I'm a scuba diver.
Yep.
The most exciting part of the reef is the one that's exposed to the currents and the deep side, the deep part of the oceans.
Yeah.
The one that's where the current isn't that live and it's closer to the beach, kind of boring. Life is meant to be lived on the edge. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you kind of crackle.
Well, yeah, it definitely creates experiences. So the reason why we wanted to start this and kind of a catalyst is so we're part of the Men of the Kingdom group, and Dean mentioned it a little bit, but so that inspired us to create this podcast. This is our third question. So any ministries that you are currently supporting or that you would recommend for any of the viewers out there that are listening just to check out?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take that lead. So about 7 years ago, I started Men of the Kingdom, which is basically our job is to encourage and equip the next generation of moral leaders in the church. Mm-hmm. And just trying to encourage men to stand up and not be passive. So we have a 12-week discipleship program where we will talk about what are the roles of a moral leader in the culture. Every man when they're out there should be a prophet declaring God's truth and helping to clarify what's most important in the world. A priest, do you lead people in worship? Are you a protector, not just physically, but how's the world, the flesh, and the devil attacking people in your mission field? And are you a provider, not just economically, but do you provide an opportunity for people to flourish? Mm-hmm. And every man should be a projector of a kingdom vision. What's King Jesus doing? How's the kingdom advancing? And what are kingdom values out in the marketplace? So we train men to try to step up into that environment.
Yep.
And at the end of it, every man is asked to do a project that either attacks evil or promotes the good. And I'm proud of you guys. You're trying to promote the good. You're trying to show what is the intersection between faith and business,
Yep.
and how is that lived authentically? I think it's a message that we need, because right now the culture is trying to separate that.
Yes.
You guys are integrating it, and I'm really proud of you. You guys are a great example of what a men of the kingdom should
Awesome.
be.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it. One final question before we close here. Best or most important business advice you've ever received? I know it's a very tough loaded question, but.
Probably the best advice I've received is be interested more than interesting. So are you interested in the best for that other person? And you're trying to get into what's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think asking questions is the right way to do that, because then you have a chance to have relational friction, if
Yep.
you will, because you're interfacing on the things that are most important to them, rather than just trying to be a character when you walk into that room. So be interested more than interesting.
Awesome. Wow. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. That concludes our first ever episode. Thank you so much for.
It's been a joy.
Yeah, thank you so much to Dean for letting us shoot with him and kind of cut it up. If you guys liked this segment, or if you think we should do shorter content, longer content, let us know. Give us a like, subscribe to us, share with people that you think would find value, fellow Christians, fellow believers. And we will be coming with you for more episodes. So stay tuned. God bless.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Bye-bye.